So a little while ago I made this EDC multi-tool on the channel. It has like an integrated wrench and a electric precision screwdriver with a little light on there and drill bit storage over here. But perhaps the most interesting for this video was the tape measure situation with the feather pencil over here. And it looks kind of sketchy when I do it like this, but I actually started using my own tape measure in that way as well, like putting a pencil on the side over here. Initially just so that I wouldn't lose the two, because often you need a pencil while you have a tape measure, right? So I've actually been using it like this for the majority of the time, holding my middle finger in between here and then marking out where I need to make the cuts. And it looks really strange, but it works and it's interesting to me. This video was supported by Sunday. Now of course there's no reason to take this one apart because it functions quite well with this pencil latched onto the side, probably even better than the version that we might be able to create, but it is interesting to take stuff apart, see how the internals function, so to say, because oftentimes it gives you a lot of inspiration for what you can do in your own projects. Just seeing how stuff works and yeah, seeing what other people are doing in their designs. So tape measure is actually quite a funny thing. I initially thought that the actual tape was pulling it back as well, but there seems to be an internal spring on these things. But I definitely recommend taping this part up because it's currently set at the correct spring level, so to say, to pull back the tape measure. And it's quite difficult to find that yourself once it's all unraveled, so to say. So the first retractable tape measure was actually patented in 1829 by James Chesterman. And it actually kind of stemmed from the decline of hoop skirts, which were these dresses which were held upright by a metallic strip on the inside. So the surplus of that became this first retractable tape measure. But if you look a little further, the actual like spring-loaded ones were a little bit later, I believe. And this might actually seem totally overkill to take this to the 3D scanning station, and that's absolutely true. The main reason I started this video was to upload a kind of a tutorial, but not really a tutorial, to my Patreon page as a free post. People have been asking me to showcase more of my process of how I model things out. And I thought this was a nice, small little project that you can follow along with. And also try out how it is to work with 3D scans, because a lot of people are really curious about that as well. If you're interested in that, there's a link in the description down below. In this first model I went for a really funky looking design with this massive stick thing sticking out the front, and there's a gap in the middle which almost looks like it's shot out, and that's just so you can hold it a little bit better because your thumb is going to be placed there while you're like turning it in on itself, right? I had actually thought about a retractable one, but I didn't really see a point in doing that because it would be one extra step to getting your markings down, so to say, and I don't think it interferes too much with the normal operation of the tape measure. But let me know in the comments if this would be a problem for you. Sunlu sent over a bunch of filament. I'm using the Hyper PLA in this one, it's in red. They sent over some other filament as well, like nylon and that kind of stuff. I've been playing around with it, it's really cool. Sunlu offers a variety of filaments in pretty much every category I could think of, so the really tough nylon stuff that you can use for heavy duty applications, but also the really beautiful silk PLA stuff which has multiple colours in the same roll. So definitely check them out, I left the link in the description down below. Special thanks to Sunlu for supporting my channel. This is actually the first time that I've been able to get a half decent print of my Creality K1C, so I'm not entirely sure if I was just using really bad filament or yeah, I changed out the build plate as well, so maybe that had something to do with it. But the support structures were just really easy to remove on these, and that was normally something that would really ruin the entire build project, as they'd rip off a bunch of other stuff as well. And with this stuff it was really quite easy to do. So I quickly test fitted all the stuff with the little switch, and I noticed that the switch was already kind of springing backwards, which wasn't, that's not too good. And I put it all back together, so you basically latch on that internal spring onto the little center column, take off the tape, and then put it in the proper position, add the little switch, and then compress the two components into each other. It was only until 1864 that the first spring-loaded tape measure was actually invented by William H. Bangs. And it took another 4 years in 1868 for Alvin Fellows to add a form of lock to that, so it doesn't like snap backwards all the time. And the concave nature that we see today was actually invented in 1922 by Hiram Farrand, as this would allow the tape measure to be more rigid, and when you're extending it, it doesn't like collapse in on itself. So I did kind of ruin the lock because I snapped off 2 bits on the inside, but I don't really use the lock anyway, so at the moment it just goes. So I kind of noticed on the other one over here, it has 2 like fins, and then in between that would be this little thing so that you can still grab it very easily. So I have actually sometimes heard people ask why this top section is moving, and that's actually to compensate for the thickness of this little thing, right? So if you're measuring something against something, then it needs to spring backwards to compensate for the width over there. If you're hooking onto something, it needs to spring forward. And this one has magnets on there, so there's quite a lot of variability in that. So I went back to the CAD program, gave my design some fins as well, so you can latch onto the tape measure a little bit easier. Also gave it a lanyard holder because I think some people might really enjoy that. Now I actually changed quite a lot from the first iteration because we're now printing it in 3 components. That mainly has to do with the center stem, which actually holds onto the tape measure. Because I printed that like on the actual body itself in the first iteration, and if we would, print it in a proper configuration where the support structures would be all around that, it would just snap off if you would remove the support structures, right? So in this model, that's a separate component. We can 3D print it in a different color, and that will look quite good. So if you're enjoying the video so far as well, definitely consider subscribing. If you don't subscribe, then you might never see another one of my build videos because it doesn't end up in your suggested feed. This is kind of a slow burn video, but usually I take it a little bit more active. This time around I was just chilling out, building something, and that's nice to do sometimes as well. So here we have the final design. The lock started working again as well. And the only thing I really changed with that was increasing the wall thickness over here. So it's pretty funny to see how rudimentary some designs are, right? That's the only thing that's really keeping it in place there. So after this, I wanted to see if there were other designs kind of like this, and this kind of made me feel like an idiot because there's this patent from 1897 which describes this tape measure with a holder in the end of it, and I believe this was mainly for marking out circles. And after that I found this patent from 1957 which has the pencil pointing down, but I think that's way smarter because you don't have to actually fold it in on itself as much as the one that I made here. Call it a speed measure. Maybe it already exists and I'm just like, I just made something stupid that's already there. Whatever. I think sometimes it's interesting to just not do the research and build it before you actually do, and then you can figure out what's out there. But I hope you enjoyed the video at least, and it gave you some inspiration for your own projects. Hopefully, see you in the next one.